Today we're going to install a set of Steeda's Progressive Rate lowering springs on this 2015 Mustang GT, which will not only improve the stance, but improve the performance as well. These Steeda Progressive Rate lowering springs are made right here in the USA and will fit your 2015 through 2019 Mustang GT, V6, or EcoBoost without the MagneRide suspension. They're going to lower it 1.1 inches in the front and 1 inch in the back for a nice flat stance. Being these are a progressive rate spring, the rate will actually vary, making excellent ride quality and excellent performance. These front springs will vary from 145 to 225 pounds, and the rears will vary from 525 to 820. For this installation, the lift or a jack and jack stands, basic hand tools, and you have to rent or buy a spring compressor. Get the installation to get the car off the ground. First thing we're going to do is remove the wheel. We're going to open the engine bay. We're going to remove 2 of the strut nuts and leave the third one loose. Now, this car does have an aftermarket strut tower brace, but the process is exactly the same. All right, down the wheel well, now we're going to use a clip tool and pop off the ABS line and then disconnect the sway bar. Use a wrench to hold the sway bar and remove the nut. All right, next remove the caliper and rotor. There's going to be 2 mounting nuts in the back to hold the caliper to the bracket. Next, ready to remove the rotor. You may have to lightly tap this with a mallet to get it off. The caliper and rotor are off now. You can see the back of the bolts and nuts. This is what actually holds the strut to the spindle. You're going to remove these, basically thread them to the edge here, and then hammer them out. And make sure you thread the nut past the end of the bolt because you don't want to mushroom the bolt when you hammer it out. All right, once you hammer the bolts of the splines are loose, you can separate the spindle from the strut. All right, now to remove the strut assembly from the car, we're going to loosen up that last nut up top and the whole thing will come out. All right, with the strut assembly out of the car, now we have to remove the spring. To do that, you have to compress it. Now, if you don't have a spring compressor, this is something you can actually rent at a local auto parts store. Now this part's optional. As far as the bump stop goes, we're only lowering it 1 inch, and usually the factory ones are honestly okay, but if you want to be safe, just cut this bottom section off, give you a little more room. Now basically the same process. You're going to compress the new Steeda spring and then reinstall the factory strut tap. And before you release tension on the spring, make sure it is seated properly in the lower piece here. All right, now the spring has tension, we can tighten the top nut. Now basically reverse the process. You're going to bolt the strut to the spindle and then reinstall the brake and the sway bar. All right, then you want to torque these to 184 pound-feet. Then torque the caliper bolts to 85 foot-pound. Okay, now we're going to reinstall the ABS line. All right, now we can tighten up the nuts on the strut cap. These are 37 foot-pound. All right, so once you repeat the process on the other side with the fronts, we're ready to move on to the rear. Same thing, get the wheel off, remove the 2 bolts for the shock and the 1 bolt for the brake line. All right, now moving up front, there's a small brace that connects the subframe to the floor. We're going to remove that next. All right, now we're ready to lower down the subframe. There's 2 bolts we have to remove to do so. First thing you want to do though is put a jack or pull jack under the rear to support it before you remove the subframe bolts. We do one side at a time. That way it keeps your subframe true when it comes off the car. All right, now we're going to lower down our jack so we can remove the spring. Usually kind of in front of the shock is the easiest way to get it out. Take the isolator, we're going to install it on the new spring, turn it till it's locked in, and put the spring in the car. When you get the spring down into place in the lower control arm, you also want to turn it until it locks into place. And once the spring's seated, jack it into place. In place, we can reinstall the subframe bolts. Make sure you thread these in by hand first and make sure they are straight before you hit them with an impact. Make sure when you install this, do not tighten the bolt all the way down until you install the small front bolts. And then torque these to 124 foot-pound. All right, push the shock into place, make sure it's underneath the alignment studs, and then reinstall the factory hardware. All right, and reinstall the brake line. All right, once everything's tight, you want to repeat the process on the other side and your installation's finished. The progressive rate springs from Steeda are going to provide excellent ride quality. Then the harder we push this car in the corners, that variable rate's going to make the car handle as well. The installation, as you saw, is pretty straightforward. An inch drop looks great. Give yourself about 2 hours. Be back on the road in no time. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure you click on the CJ button so you subscribe for future videos, and click the corner up here for more videos for your Mustang.